Everybody. So, as the previous person discussed, we are talking this week over the controversy over how to best teach English language learners, what I'll refer to as ELL. Just to give you some context, over 9% of the U.S. school system is English language learners at this point. That's over 4.4 million students. In Rhode Island, as of 2009, about 6% of students were English language learners, but note that 76% of those lived in one of the 4 core cities, so Providence, Central Falls, Pawtucket, East Providence. So what's up for debate here, though, is how best to teach these students. So as the previous speaker, Aaron, talked a bit about, there are 2 primary ideas about how best to teach students who come to school speaking a different language than English. So first is the English-only approach. This is often called English immersion. English immersion programs are basically set up so that you separate out students who don't speak English, and they spend a year or 2 intensely learning English. And then when they are fluent in English, you move them into the mainstream classroom. People have objected to English immersion for 2 primary reasons. First, and primarily, because English language learner students, so ESL or ELL students, often fall behind in other subjects because they're being taught in English. And they're being taught in English before they understand English. So in these cases, students struggling over the language prevents them from learning math, because they don't have the vocabulary to understand the math questions, even if they're actually very good at math. And so, there's some research that suggests that, if you test Spanish-speaking students on math in Spanish, they actually do pretty well on math, but if you test them in English, they look like they're doing very poorly in math. And so, and that's when they first get here. And so then if you start teaching them only in English, they fall behind on the math skills because they're struggling with the vocabulary, basically. So in the end, ELL students can end up in special ed or remedial classes just because of their language skills and not because of the subject matter skills. And so then they fall behind because they're not being taught at the level they can actually achieve. They're being taught at the level of English that they know. The other objection to English immersion is that it doesn't take advantage of the resources that these kids have in a second language. So research has found that kids who undertake English immersion programs often graduate from high school with no knowledge of the basic grammar or the writing skills in their native language. So this means that instead of them being able to use their native language for work purposes in today's global society, they come out only partially knowing their native language and only partially knowing English. So in today's global society, people are starting to realize that harnessing the native languages of these kids can be a bonus for the students, as they can come out being bilingual and fully bilingual instead of being semilingual in 2 languages. But there's also objections to bilingual programs, as you saw in the readings. So today, what I want to talk about really is that bilingual education is experiencing a comeback. People a lot of people in my neighborhood, and like myself, have started to want their English-speaking children to learn a second language. That people are starting to say, you know what, speaking a second language in today's global society is a real benefit. I'd like my kid to learn a second language. So some public schools and some charter schools have begun doing what they call two-way bilingual education. Two-way bilingual programs are also known as dual language or dual immersion education programs. It consists of teaching English language learners in both English and their native language at different times of the day, and teaching English-dominant kids in English and in a foreign language at different times of the day. So this way, Spanish speakers, for example, get to harness their Spanish skills at the same time as learning English, while English speakers get to harness their English skills at the same time while learning Spanish. They also get to be in a classroom together, so that's why it's called two-way. And so there are people in the class who have the language skills to be able to really harness the materials who help with the kids who are falling behind. So one of the benefits of dual language schools that few people talk about, but to link back to what we've been talking about, is that they can reintegrate schools or integrate schools that were never integrated in the first place. Since upper middle class white parents are now enthusiastic about having their children, or in some places having their children, learn a foreign language, they will opt into schools with higher minority ratios than they would in traditional public schools. So, for example, in Rhode Island, there is one two-way education program in Rhode Island. The International Charter School is located in Pawtucket, and it serves kids from Providence, East Providence, Central Falls, and Pawtucket. Entrance in this school is done through a lottery. So every year, about 800 people apply for only about 25 slots. So in the end, the school ends up being, it's reserved for, it has one chunk of the school that is reserved for people who speak only Spanish, another chunk of the school that's reserved to people who speak only Portuguese, and then another third of the school that's only English. And the English-dominant kids are paired with either Portuguese or Spanish. And so then you have Portuguese speakers and English speakers together, and Spanish speakers and English speakers together. And so you have these two-way bilingual programs, and they're extraordinarily popular, and there aren't enough slots, obviously. So these have become popular. There are also ways to potentially integrate schools in areas where ethnicity is causing segregation, right? And so, you know, because, for example, like this school, the International Charter School, is not in, you know, a wealthy neighborhood, but people in wealthy neighborhoods are wanting to send their kids there because it offers something that they think is beneficial. So that's the debate for today, is over this question. So I hope all of you are doing well, and please let me know if you're having any problems with the papers, and I look forward to reading them. All right, take care.